All right. It's the post-game show, the live Panther-Lair Post-Game show. Right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, people are filtering in as Pitt's win over Iowa State went final just a few minutes ago. I mean, Pitt just logged a blowout win in the NCAA tournament. An 18-point blowout that was 20 points, for the last 4.5 minutes or so. Was, double-digit lead for the better part of the final 14, 15 minutes of the half. Yeah, the final 14 minutes of the half. A 14-point lead, at least. And Pitt never really let up. And it's funny, I mean, we'll talk a lot about this, and we'll talk a lot about this game from every angle here over the next hour or so, or however long we need to talk about it. But, I mean, you want to talk about an uncomfortable 18-point win or an uncomfortable 20-point lead. I wonder, jog your memories as we sit here and talk throughout this hour. I'm curious, what was the moment where you finally felt comfortable with this game? I think I know when it was. I think I know when I thought, okay, I'm pretty sure they're not going to lose this game. But I'm curious. You can start putting your thoughts, your comments, and questions in there in the live stream, in the chat screen there. But I'm curious, what point was it when you felt, okay, they're going to hold on? I know it wasn't when they were up 22-2. I know when Pitt was up 22-2 to open the game, I know what you were thinking. You were thinking, God, it's not a big enough lead. And when Iowa State then went on a giant run to end the first half, I know you felt like the game was slipping away. So I know that. And I know when it was the second half and it was 30-25, 33-25, even 36-25 after Nelly Cummings hit a three. And then it was 36-26. I know it's, you probably weren't comfortable, even as that lead started stretching out 12 points, 10 points. But I'll tell you the point where I thought to myself, okay, I don't think they're going to blow this. I think they're going to be able to hold off this team and win. I'll tell you when it was. It was over a span of about, 49 or 50 seconds, around the 7-minute mark. Pitt was up 40-30 after Iowa State actually hit some free throws. They made both ends of a 1-and-1. And it was back and forth. There was a 10-second call on Jamarius Burton. It started feeling like things might be slipping away. Burton missed a jump shot, and Jorge Diaz-Graham got an offensive rebound, but they couldn't convert, and it just sort of felt like it was slipping away. At the 7:08 mark, Pitt got the ball up. I think it was against the press. I think it was Jorge de Guillermo. Jorge de Guillermo for the dunk to make it 42-30. Ian Eagle, hit it with the "oh brother" call, and it reminded me of, I think it was Jorge's quote that when you make a basket, it make one person happy. With an assist, it make two people happy. And he made more than two people happy with that play. And then after that, Nelly Cummings drives and makes a basket, forces Iowa State to call a timeout. Pitt goes up by 14. I think you could feel it at that point. I think the momentum had shifted. I think Pitt had taken control. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like a 14-point lead with 6 minutes left to go is safe, because we all know no lead is safe until the final horn. But I think at that point, I said to myself, all right, I don't think they're going to blow this. All right, I think they're going to hold on, and I think they're advancing, and I think they're going to win this game. And sure enough, after that, Greg Elliott made a couple free throws, and then Nike Sabandi, maybe that was the moment. Nike Sabandi's and one on a 3-point shot that he drained. A 4-point play to make it a 20-point lead with 4:47 left to go in the game. Maybe that was the moment for you. For me, it was the back-to-back of the Diaz-Graham twins connecting and then Nelly Cummings scoring on a drive. I think that was the moment when it clicked for me that they're winning this game. They're beating Iowa State. They're beating the number 5 team from the ACC, is beating the number 5 team from the Big 12, and they're advancing. They're going to the round of 32 with an opportunity to play themselves into the Sweet 16 if they can beat Xavier on Sunday. And it's pretty remarkable to to say what I just said, particularly when you look at how this game went down. And you look at some of the stats in this game, and holy cow, Josh Newark is jumping in the chat saying, give us the scouting report against Xavier. Josh, I'm still trying to get my head around this game that we just watched, and you're asking for the scouting report on Xavier? I am not yet ready to give you a scouting report on Xavier. I've got a lot to think about with this game so far, and a lot to figure out here of what went down just against Iowa State. We're gonna have plenty to talk about, for this one. Josh, we'll give you a scouting report on Xavier here, soon enough, but I don't have that one for you yet. This is the Panther-Lair Post-Game Show. I should introduce it. We're from Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. It's all right there at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. And believe me, the message boards are lighting up like a Christmas tree right now. Everybody's online talking about this game. As you can imagine, our guy Jim Hammond is down there in Greensboro. He covered the game. He's going to have lots of coverage, post-game coverage from the game in the locker room, and Jeff Capel and all that stuff. So believe me, you'll have lots to read and check out there at Panther-Lair.com. So go check that out. And of course, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and click subscribe. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, turn on your notifications so you get an alert sent to your phone whenever we go live. We didn't know what time this game was going to end, and so we didn't know what time our post-game show was going to start. But if you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, you have your notifications turned on, you get an alert, and so you know exactly when we're going to start. And because of that win, because of the way it went down, we got to enjoy a beverage with this one, don't we? Now, coming into this game, there were some things I really emphasized and points I really tried to make. I made it on the Morning Pit yesterday. I wrote about it on Panther-Lair.com. I wrote about it on the message boards today at Panther-Lair.com, some stat breakdowns. I wrote it in our staff picks on Panther-Lair.com. The biggest thing I kept coming back to in this game over and over and over again is that Iowa State's strength was defense. Like, they were top 10 on Ken Pomeroy's site in adjusted defensive efficiency. That's tough. That's a real challenge, and they did a good job defensively against all those great teams in the Big 12. And so that was going to be the challenge for Pitt. How could they score on Iowa State? How could they, make baskets? How would they be able to score enough to beat Iowa State, given how good Iowa State's defense was? And what I said was, my point or my contention was that, look, this is not the first good defensive team Pitt has faced this season. As a matter of fact, they've faced a handful of them. 8 games against teams in the top 10 8 games against teams in the top 50 of Ken Pomeroy's defensive rankings, right? And in those 8 games, they had a record of 5-3, with 2 of the 3 losses coming in 2 games against Duke. And what I said was, look, the difference there, the key point to identify is that Duke was not only top 50 in defensive efficiency, they were top 50 in offense as well. Against those other teams, against Virginia and Northwestern and North Carolina and Mississippi State, they had top 50 defenses, but not top 50 offenses. I said that Pitt can survive against a good defense, provided that good defense doesn't also have an offense like Duke's that can score as well. Provided that good defense isn't complemented by an offense that's almost as good or almost equal Pitt's offense. If they run into a team that can play really good defense and has an offense that's roughly equal to theirs, they're in trouble. I don't know if it'll all look like the Duke game, but they're in trouble. But when they play against these teams that have good defenses but lousy offenses, which was the case with Mississippi State, which was the case with Virginia, which was the case with Northwestern, to some extent North Carolina, and abso-freaking-lutely was the case with Iowa State today, the result is what you've seen. Now, it wasn't, they couldn't beat VCU. VCU had a top 50 defense and not a top 50 offense. But against these good defensive teams that aren't very good at scoring, Pitt can generally outlast them and make enough buckets to go. Now, they didn't necessarily make that many buckets today. Pitt had 14 made field goals. They got 25 of their 59 points from the free throw line, which, you want to talk about a huge credit? 25 of 29 from the stripe. And that's 15 of 19 in the first half, 10 of 10 in the second half. Huge. Now, it's an 18-point win. It's not like that wasn't necessarily the difference in the game, although they did make 14 more free throws than Iowa State. And we can't take away, we can't ignore the fact that Iowa State is awful on offense, and they shot like it. They shot 14 of 60 from the field today. They made 5 field goals in the second half, and some of them were really late in the game. 23%, you're not going to win many games if you shoot 23% from the floor, 10%, 2 of 21 from 3. But Pitt was still able, I think a team like Iowa State is probably not going to win when they shoot that way, but I think the way they played this year is shooting poorly, scoring low, but playing such good defense that they're able to hold teams off. Playing such good defense that they're low. It's like playing Pitt in the 2000s. And that was the case against Mississippi State on Tuesday night, who I think was a lot like Pitt in the 2000s defensively. And it was the case against Iowa State today, who maybe was a little bit more active in going after turnovers than Pitt was in the 2000s, but still just as energetic on defense, just as tenacious on defense, just as borderline committing fouls every possession on defense as Pitt was back then. And if you're going to play against a team like that, you have to be patient, you have to hold back frustration, and you have to outlast them. And I think that's what Pitt did. Now, during the second 10 minutes of the first half, I don't think they did a good job of that. I think frustration got the better of them. I think they let Iowa State's sort of nonstop defensive tenacity, their tenacious D, if you will, they let it get in their heads and they let it force them to panic and lose focus a little bit. And I think that's why Iowa State was able to make a little run. Now, Iowa State had a few shots start falling, whereas nothing fell for them in the first 10 minutes. But they were also able to generate points out of Pitt's carelessness with passes and out of grabbing defensive rebounds on, some ill-advised drive attempts and jump shot attempts. I think at the locker room at halftime, Pitt settled down a little bit. I think the players refocused a little bit, and they were able to, eventually pull away and get what they needed to get to keep Iowa State ultimately to almost a 20-point loss. I mean, it was 20 with 4 minutes left to go. A 20-point win in the NCAA tournament as an 11 seed beating a 6 seed, which, unless I'm missing something, I just kind of glanced through the media guide real quick before we started here. I was looking at Pitt's record as an NCAA tournament seed. It was seeding started in 1979. Pitt has never been an 11 seed before, but they were a 12 seed and once, and they lost to the 5 seed that year. They've been a 10 seed a couple times. They won a game against the 7 seed. They were 1-2 as a 10 versus a 7. They're 0-1 as a 10 versus a 2. As a 9 seed, they have 1 win. They beat Colorado as a 9, beating an 8. And they have never won as an 8 seed, and so on and so forth. But I can't find a bigger upset in terms of seed line in Pitt history. I can't find another game where Pitt beat, as an 11 beating a 6, beat a 5 seed line, a 5 line difference in seeds. I mean, this was an historic win for Pitt. And it is pretty interesting that, in these 2 NCAA tournament games so far, this Pitt team that has relied so much on offense and has been able to win so much on offense this season has scored 60 and 59 in 2 tournament games. Now, part of that is that they're playing 2 of the 10 best defenses in the country, 2 of the top 10 defenses in the country. Mississippi State was right near the top of the SEC. Iowa State was the number 1 defense in the Big 12. Ken Pomeroy likes them both, I think 6 and 8. I forget which one was 6 and which one was 8, but they were both top 8 defenses nationally this year. But they didn't have good enough offenses to offset the scoring Pitt was able to accomplish. Quite a game. Really impressive game. Really impressive win. Way to, obviously a huge start at the beginning to jump out to the 22-2 lead. And I get distracted because I see the comment that says, Chris Peak, great haircut. Are those blonde highlights? Brother, if you're seeing blonde here, you got into a few too many of Uncle Graham's crackers because that's all white. But, all right, if you want to join the conversation here on the live stream, you can get in the chat screen. It's right over there along the right-hand side of your screen. Post your comment or your question there. We will get to as many of them as we can over the course of the next hour or so. Keep talking about this game as we like to do. If you want to make sure your comment gets read, your question gets answered, you can always be a super chatter. Right down at the bottom of the screen, there's a little $sign. You click that, kick a couple bucks to the podcast, support us for doing this thing, and we will definitely make sure we get to your comment and question. In the meantime, we'll get as far as we can in these comments and questions. So let's start with General So's Chicken. He says, and they said the Big 12 conference is miles ahead of the ACC. Seriously, clowns. Well, Pitt didn't exactly face Baylor here. And they certainly didn't face the powerhouse of West Virginia. Unfortunately, there's no opportunity for a Pitt-West Virginia rematch in the NCAA tournament since the Mountaineers went home. The comparing conferences thing, so much of it just becomes... Sometimes I feel like it just becomes navel-gazing at a certain point, and this is the case in football too. Well, this conference is great. Well, how do you know? Well, this team is the best. Well, how do you know? Well, look at the teams they beat. Well, they beat the teams in their conference. So if we're just, it's like this, it's like circular logic, right? Well, Team A is great because they beat Team B in their conference, and we know that Team B is great because they are in the conference with Team A, and we know that Team A is great because they beat Team B in this conference. I don't know. I don't know which conference is better than the other. The Big 12 was sort of the commonly accepted best conference in basketball this year. Well, they had a team get bounced on day one. So did the ACC. The ACC also got a win on day one. Right now, Pitt, number 5 team in the ACC, went head-to-head with the number 5 team in the Big 12. Advantage ACC, at least in this one. I don't even like using... I don't know. I have a hard time comparing the conferences. Football and basketball, I don't like using bowl game results as comparisons for conferences. And NCAA tournament, yes and no. I mean, it's the ball bounces certain ways. It's a one game deal. I don't really know how you would determine the best conference, but it's a conversation people like to have, I guess. Paul Moore says, I didn't realize how much I missed being a part of this tournament. It's definitely, this tournament's been a blast to watch so far. These first 2 days, I mean, yesterday was great fun to watch. Today, the what game was that? The Kennesaw State game was a blast to watch. I mean, that went right down to it. Charleston had a great chance to beat San Diego State. I mean, we've had some great games, some fun games to watch so far. And then you add in that extra element of sort of this, having our own stakes in the game. Sorry, I'm getting really distracted because True TV has, like Impractical Jokers on or something. So I left the TV on thinking there would just be basketball after it, but no, I have to change the channel. The tournament's been a lot of fun to watch, and then adding in those personal stakes of having the team that you cover or you root for or whatever it is, it adds a whole lot of extra juice. Just like when you were filling out your bracket and you're trying to decide how far to take Pitt. Or I told this story in the 3-2-1 column yesterday that I'm in a fantasy March Madness challenge where we draft teams of 7 players. We each, there's 14 of us or something. We draft teams of 7 players, and as you work through, it was always fun to see who would be the first person to take a Pitt guy, because most of the people in the league are Pitt fans. And I think this year, Blake Hinson and Jamarius Burton both went in the 4th round of an 8-round draft. Sabandy and Cummings went in the last round. It's fun to have those stakes again. And it's fun to sit here and be talking about a game that's relevant. I mean, I wasn't going to do a live stream after, Furman beat Virginia, but with the Pitt game, we got a lot to talk about. We got some things to discuss, and that's pretty, I agree. I think it's fun to have that connection there again. Patrick Brennan says, for all the hysteria of blowing a 20-point lead, Pitt basically won by 20 anyway. Yeah, it was really interesting at halftime, because as they went into halftime, you look back at the first half, it was 2 halves. The first half was broken into 2 halves, where for the first 10 minutes, it was all Pitt. I mean, really, it was 22-2. Guillermo Diaz-Graham made 2 free throws to make it 22-2 at the 10:25 mark. So, I mean, almost, and then Iowa State finally made a layup, their first basket of the game, at the 9 either 53 or 33. I can't read my writing, but under 10 minutes, they made their first basket, and then they went on a run after that to, what was it, 21-8 run to finish the half. And so Pitt goes 22-2 over the first 10 minutes of the half. Iowa State goes 21-8 over the last 10 minutes of the half. And so you went into halftime really kind of thinking like, all right, Pitt was in control the first 10 minutes. Iowa State was in control the second 10 minutes. Does Iowa State carry that momentum into the locker room and out of the locker room? Or does it flip back? Does Pitt take control back of this game? I guess that was probably the biggest question everyone was asking themselves at halftime. Is, did Pitt fully lose control of this game? Or is this just an ebbs and flows, ups and downs sort of thing? Where Pitt has to refocus and try and take control back. Ultimately that's what ended up happening, even though Iowa State scored first. And, I thought Iowa State, they never let up on defense. Their defensive intensity never really lagged. And coming out of the locker room, I forget who got the ball first. I think Pitt got the ball first, and it was boom right off the bat. They were on Pitt and just smothering them with defense. And I didn't even note what kind of shot Pitt got, but they didn't score. And then Iowa State ends up scoring at the other end on a drive where you thought, okay, whoa, Iowa State might have the momentum, but Pitt kept battling. Nelly Cummings got an and one. And then he took, an offensive foul. But after Greg Elliott missed a three, Guillermo Diaz-Graham got an offensive rebound, and Nelly Cummings knocked down a three. And now the lead was back to 11, and Pitt started taking control back. So I think there was a lot of curiosity. I don't know if I was panicking as much as most of the Pitt fans I see on Twitter and I saw on Twitter. At halftime, but certainly you wondered where the momentum was going to go because it didn't feel like it was in Pitt's favor anymore when they went to the locker room. But they were able to regroup, refocus, and surprise, surprise, this Pitt team showed they could hold up in the face of adversity. This Pitt team showed that, when they had to deal with some challenges, they were able to answer it, which is kind of what they've been doing all season. This was a new kind of game for them to win, a game that was really low scoring, a game where they played against a really good. This was probably the best defense they've faced all season. Would you agree about that? I think there were matchups in other games that were particularly challenging, but in terms of total team defense, I think Iowa State was probably the best defense they've faced all year. And they just had to kind of outlast it. They had to survive. They had to keep chipping away. Even though they were holding a lead, they had to keep chipping away at that defense sort of possession by possession and get whatever they could. And if it meant the free throw line, if it meant second chance points, whatever it was, they just had to keep kind of grinding. This was a rock fight. Just like Tuesday night was a rock fight. Pitt is getting to Sunday by earning it honestly. I think they earned it very honestly because these were two battles, and I don't have the scouting report on Xavier yet, but if Xavier's going to play that way again, I don't know how many more games Pitt can have like this. So hopefully for their sake, Xavier plays a different style of basketball and maybe isn't quite so tough defensively. Pitt can have a little, not an easier go of it, but maybe not quite such a grind. Let's see here. Alex Getchell says, gutsy win, great defense, good from the stripe, good rebounding, let the good times roll for at least 48 more hours. Yeah, going to those numbers. 25 of 29 from the free throw line. That was huge. 39 rebounds. They out-rebounded Iowa State by 2. Iowa State had 37. Pitt had 39. They got 8 rebounds from Guillermo Diaz-Graham. 8 rebounds from Greg Elliott, 5 each from Nike Sabandi and Jorge Diaz-Graham, 4 each from Jamarius Burton and Blake Hinson. You talk about a group rebounding performance. You got it right there. You really did. And the minutes distribution was interesting where nobody played more than 35 minutes. Elliott and Burton played 35 each. Cummings played 31. You got 27 out of Blake Hinson, 25 out of Guillermo, 21 out of Nike Sabandi, 10 and 11 out of Jorge and Federico, respectively. Federico got back in the game, played for the first time since the Duke game, when he played minimal minutes there, obviously dealing with his injury. But, you got to give a huge amount of credit to Guillermo Diaz-Graham in this one. finished the game. I want to get his full stat line up here. 9 points, 8 rebounds, 3 blocks, 1 steal, no turnovers, and 4 fouls. And I'll tell you, and I'll include that 4 fouls because I don't think he had too many cheap fouls. I think they were physical fouls where he was trying to make his presence felt and going for blocks and trying to play tough. And I don't think you can say enough good things about how Guillermo Diaz-Graham played in this game and the experience he's gotten over the last 2 games. I mean, you talk about growing up fast, and they always say that freshmen are no longer freshmen by the time you get to January or February. They played so much basketball. But I think even just this week, we've seen him grow up so much over the course of these 2 games. I really, it's been impressive to watch. And this was probably a better matchup for him than Mississippi State was with Tolu Smith. But I commend him for given everything he had in that Mississippi State game. But this was a little bit better matchup. Iowa State didn't have that big, dominant front court guy like Mississippi State did. And I think he was able to have some success. What did I say? 3 blocks? 4 blocks? How many did I just tell you? I already forgot the number. 3 blocks, 1 steal, along with the 8 rebounds and the 9 points. I mean, just a huge performance from Guillermo Diaz-Graham. I mean, big credit to him. I think, when you look at who was their leading scorer. So Cummings had 13. Burton scored 11. 9 of those 11 came from the free throw line. Burton was 1 of 7 from the floor. Greg Elliott, 8 of 9 from the free throw line. He scored 10 points, only made 1 field goal. If I told you, and I always hate doing these things, but this is too funny. If I told you that Blake Hinsing, Greg Elliott, and Jamarius Burton combined to shoot 3 of 20 from the floor, 3 of 20, and Pitt ended up winning by 18. Like if I just don't offer any of the context about who they were playing or how the opponent only scored 41 points, but think about that. Hinson, Elliott, Burton combined to shoot 3 of 20 from the floor. And Pitt wins by 18. Now, it helped that those 3 guys also shot 19 of 21 from the free throw line, including 17 of 19 for Elliott and Burton. So they definitely made up their points that way. They knocked down some clutch, they made almost everything from the free throw line. So that was huge. But I think it's a testament to, Guillermo Diaz-Graham scoring 9. Nelly Cummings, I think, didn't have a great first half, but kind of showed up in the second half. He only had 1 turnover, and he had 2 assists in the second half after he had, 3 turnovers in the first half. And he scored 11 of his 13 points in the second half as well. So Nelly Cummings made a big impact in the second half. But these other guys, they did their damage from the free throw line. And Pitt ended up getting a blowout win. Kind of remarkably. Let's see. Josh Newark says, absolutely dominant performance by Pitt. The only complaint is we need to work on inbounds plays. Nothing else to complain about. Inbounds plays have been it's been an adventure all year. Not necessarily every game, but it's happened enough that I think you can look back and say, boy, why do they have so much trouble inbounding the ball? And it seems to happen somewhat frequently. Maybe not every game, but maybe once every 2 or 3 games. And it certainly was the case here. I'm going to put a lot of it on giving credit to Iowa State's defense. Again, I'm going to come back to a lot of what Iowa State did. I mean, and I can't tell you the strategy behind it. We have our guy Steven Gertz to tell you that. He'll tell you what happened, what Pitt did defensively or what Iowa State did defensively. I can't explain those things to you, but I can say that Iowa State works their tails off on defense, that they're relentless in defending. And I think that even came through on the inbounds plays that Pitt had. Yeah, they had real adventures on the inbounds plays, multiple turnovers on inbounds plays, multiple near turnovers on inbounds plays. And they still, I think that's a credit to Iowa State. I don't think every team is going to be that difficult to inbound the ball against. But yeah, I mean, I agree, Josh. I think it was a dominant performance, even if it didn't feel like it at various points. Certainly in the final 10 minutes of the first half, and even at points, I think when Pitt had a 10, 12, 14 point lead in the second half, there were times where it didn't feel like a dominant performance. But you look overall, And yeah, I mean, it has all the hallmarks of a dominant win, which I think is ultimately what it was. And when he goes in the record books, we're going to look back and we're going to say Pitt as an 11 seed beat a 6 seed by 18 points. That is one to write home about. I kind of opened the show talking about that moment. What was the moment when you truly felt like Pitt had it locked up, that they weren't going to lose, that Iowa State was not going to come back, that Pitt had fully put the game away? I said when the Twins hooked up for a dunk play, followed up by Nelly Cummings driving to move it to a 14-point game. A number of people chimed in. Jake Pagliaro says Nike's and one, which I think was another huge one. 4:47 left to go. Nike Sabandi drains a three, draws a foul, knocks it down, goes 50, makes it a 20-point game. I'm trying to think. That just sort of made me remember real quickly. Blake Hinson got called for a flop, and we haven't seen that. I've talked with other people about this occasionally over the final month of the season or so, saying that you remember that happened multiple times earlier in the year, and it was strange because I haven't seen that called before, but apparently a point of emphasis this season, and Blake Hinson got a couple of them really early in those first few games. But then it stopped. It hadn't happened. And he hadn't been trying to draw it. Now, his flop that he got called for today, I think it was absolutely one that he deserved to be called for. I think he was absolutely trying to buy a call and went too far in it. And to be honest, I think if you look at one or two of the threes he shot before that, I think you could see something that could merit a call. I wouldn't be surprised if he got a little talking to from the ref before the one he got called for. I mean, maybe not. I could be wrong about that, but I think there were others that probably drew the attention of the officials. And when he did it that time, they said that's enough. You're not going to do that anymore. I don't think Hinson played again after that. I think that was around the 9:30 mark or so of the second half. I don't think he came back in after that foul. What did he finish with? He finished with 4 fouls, played 27 minutes, but I don't think he came back in. I would have to look that up. But it was interesting to see that get called again. And I think when you watched it and saw the play live and saw the replays, you said, yeah, that's a flop. And that's what he had done earlier in the year, particularly kicking that leg out. You can't see it because it's under the camera, but I'm kicking my leg out to demonstrate. Kicking the leg out, I think, is what drew those calls early in the season, and I think it's what got him that call today, too. But as we talk about the plays that really kind of made it a lock in your mind, Nike Sabandi's and one. Kevin Gagliardi says the dunk play by the Twins. I think that was a big one for me. XMarks97 says the Nike Sabandi 4-point play. CD says, for me, it was that Greg Elliott layup with like 4 and change left. Yeah, that one against the press, right? Iowa State was selling out on the press. Pitt finally broke it cleanly. They didn't take a 10-second violation or get into a real jam or turn the ball over or anything like that. They managed to get ahead to Elliott, who had an easy layup, and he finished it. That made it a 20-point game again with 4:10 left to go in the game. And yeah, I think that was a huge play too. I think that went a long way you're up 20 with 4 minutes left. It's not that can't be blown, but you're pretty sure that Iowa State did not have the offensive ability and the offensive firepower to blow it at that point. I think we had seen enough of the Cyclones to know it wasn't going to happen. Let's see here. Montana Marie says, how many turnovers in the second half versus the first? That's a good question. Pitt had 15 turnovers total. They had 9 in the first half, 6 in the second. There was a point in the first half, I think had a lot to do with the run that Iowa State went on, where they were being careless. And it was Jamarius Burton and Nelly Cummings in particular who were being careless with the ball. Look at the first half box score here. Cummings and Burton had 3 turnovers each in the first half. And they just weren't, they were being sloppy. They were making passes that maybe you can get away with when you play North Florida or Sacred Heart or maybe even Louisville or Florida State or somebody. But you're playing one of the best defensive teams in the country. You have to know that this is what they do. They force a lot of turnovers. They get a lot of steals. You have to be careful with the ball. I mean, you have to be far more careful with the ball than Pitt was in those situations. I think you have to respect your opponent and respect the defense more than they did right there. And I think that was, that was a big part of the problem. And I think it led to, I'm going to go back to the box score real quick. Yeah, Iowa State had 10 points off turnovers in the first half. So in the first half, they scored 23 points. 10 of those came off of the 9 turnovers they forced. And so you can't make those mistakes. I mean, you can't make those mistakes at all, but you certainly can't make those mistakes against a good defensive team. You've got to take care of the ball better than that. I thought there was a start time. According to ESPN's site, there's no start time for Sunday's game against Xavier yet. It'll be on Sunday, but it's not listed as having a start time. I thought it was like 12 something, but maybe I didn't see that right. All right, let's see what else we got here. Paul Moore says, I texted my Pitt friend group at 5:27 p.m. Are we going to lose this game? It was after the 10-second violation call on the possession following the flop. Yeah, that's right. Hinson flopped. They had the technical free throw that Iowa State missed, and then Iowa State converted both ends of a 1-and-1 to cut the lead to 10. And then I think it was after that there was a 10-second call on Jamarius Burton, but that led directly into the dunk from the Twins and the Nelly Cummings drive that put it back to 14, forced Iowa State to call a timeout, and you felt like the momentum had totally shifted back to Pitt. Josh Newark says, Pitt was in control from the tip. I was comfortable from the start. Cyclones couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Yeah, you kept wondering so you knew Iowa State wasn't good offensively, but you kept wondering if they were going to get into a groove, if they were going to hit their stride and start making shots. Like, so when you have a big, a really lopsided start to a game like that, 22-2, right? It reminds me of that game against Syracuse a few years ago that was like 18-0, 20-0 to open the game. Pitt went on a 20-0 run, 18-0 run, whatever it was to open the game. And I think by the time they got to halftime, it was tied, or it was like a one or two possession game. Because I think a lot of times when you have those giant lopsided runs to open a game, you often have sort of a equal and opposite reaction. Either the team that was that took the lead cools off, or the team that fell behind heats up a little bit. It tends to balance out. And so you wondered where that balancing out was going to come. And it came when Iowa State went on a run over the final 10 minutes and Pitt kind of went cold. I think both teams, I didn't expect Pitt to be as good offensively as good offensively as they were in the first 10 minutes for the entire game. And I think they sort of regressed to the mean there. I also didn't expect Iowa State to be great offensively in this game, but they weren't going to be as bad as they were in the first half. So, that second 10 minutes of the first half was sort of that balancing out, that regression to the mean of Pitt kind of coming back down to earth a little bit and playing like a team that's facing a defense as good as Iowa State's, and then Iowa State coming up a little bit. Now, they weren't going to be great because they're not that good offensively, as evidenced by all the baskets they missed. I mean, three-point shooting was never going to be effective for this team, and then they missed too many shots inside. And some of that is a credit to Pitt's defense. I mean, I think we're probably going to spend, most of the conversation after this game is going to be about how bad Iowa State's offense was. But I think you give some credit to Pitt's defense as well. I think they did a good job defending that team. They gave up some open stuff, particularly during that second 10 minutes of the first half. But for the most, I think in the second half, they really cut down on those open looks. They did a good job defending. They packed it in around the basket, which is exactly what they needed to do against this team who presented no real threat from outside. And they, I think they got it done defensively. I think they had, Iowa State was already starting at a low level with the effectiveness of its offense, but I think Pitt's defense was able to make them even worse, if that makes sense. All right, I want to get to more comments and questions. Before I do, and believe me, I'm going to get through as many of these as we can. We got a lot of time to talk here tonight. I do want to tell you about our friend Montana. You guys have heard me talk about Montana. Hopefully you've been checking it out. Look, it's almost 7 o'clock. You watch the Pitt game through dinner time. You're hungry right now. Go over to Montana's site, fortheperfectbite.com. Montana's a big Pitt fan, lifelong diehard Pitt fan. Her family's had football season tickets since the 70s. And she's a chemical engineer by day, but she's a chef by night. And she has a passion for good food and local restaurants. She loves to cook, and she's got this food blog, fortheperfectbite.com, where she develops, cooks, and photographs her own recipes, and then writes and posts the recipes to share with your friends and family. And she also highlights local Pittsburgh restaurants on her Instagram, which is fortheperfectbite. So it's Friday night. You don't want to cook. You want to go somewhere to eat. Go check out Montana's Instagram, fortheperfectbite. Follow her there. And check out her blog, fortheperfectbite.com, and find lots of good food to eat. Montana's got a special Pitt recipe she developed after the ACC championship game 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. How are we referring to that? 2021 ACC championship game? But it's blueberry lemon panther claws. It sounds delicious. She's going to have to get to work on something for the NCAA tournament. Montana, if you're watching this, you need to get something going for this. Some kind of... we'll have to think about it. Maybe something Spanish. Can you make flan? Maybe, something along those lines to recognize what's happened here over this week, which has been a pretty special week for Pitt basketball. I think everyone would have to agree. So go check it out, fortheperfectbite.com, and on Instagram at fortheperfectbite. Thanks to Montana for supporting us for sure, as always. I also, right before we get back to the comments and questions here, go to snapper49.com. Pitt long snapper Byron Floyd. He's doing great stuff there, raising money for Children's Hospital, snapper49.com. All right, Super Chatter, RJC Man 38 comes in and says, great game. Pitt, Big 12 blows, and Pitt handled their business. Uniforms not my favorite. Turnovers were a problem. Uniforms, hey, you know what about the uniforms? Pitt is now 5-0. When wearing the black uniforms this season. 5-0, including both NCAA tournament games. They're not taking those things off anytime soon. Also, and I wasn't going to post this during the game, when Pitt has a lead at halftime this season, they're 19-2. So even though everyone was panicking, this was another funny thing, right? At halftime, Pitt's lead was 30-23. They were up 7 at halftime of an NCAA tournament game. And there was panic in the streets. Understandably, I'm not going to pretend like I don't understand why you were panicking about it. But a 7-point lead at halftime of an NCAA tournament game? You should feel good about your chances. I guess it's because the momentum seemed to be favoring Iowa State at that point. And not seemed, the momentum was favoring Iowa State at that point. They had gone on a big run. What did I say it was? 21-8? They went on a 21-8 run to end the first half, the final 10 minutes of the half. They had the momentum. So I understand why there was panic, even though it was a 7-point lead at halftime. But I almost tweeted that out, that coming into this game, Pitt was 18-2 this season when leading at halftime. But I said, no, people will yell at you for jinxing things. And then if they do lose, you'll be really accused of jinxing it. But they are now 19-2 when leading at halftime. They are 5-0 when they wear the black uniforms. They're going to be the road game again. I'm going to assume Xavier wears its, the whites. And when they do, Pitt should put on the blacks. Because, why would you mess with it? I don't want to, do the classic Yinzer thing and relate this back to the Steelers. But do you remember the 2000, it was the year they beat the Seahawks, right? The 2005 Super Bowl. They were the road team all through the playoffs leading into the Super Bowl. And they won all those games wearing the white road jerseys. And then they got to the Super Bowl. I think they were the home team, but they chose to wear the white because it's working. Not to be superstitious about it, but it's working. And Pitt right now, look, they're going to be the however you want to look at it, lower seed, higher seed against everybody they play from here on out. Unless, Drake beats Miami, there'd be an opportunity there. Or Kent State beats Indiana. Maybe there's an opportunity there, but they're going to be they're not going to have the choice. They're not going to be the home team in any of these games. And so they're going to have, they're going to be able to wear those black uniforms and keep building on that winning streak. How about a matchup with Sean Miller? And like I said, we don't have a scouting report on Xavier yet, but Sean Miller versus Pitt. That's pretty outstanding. All right, let's get more comments and questions here. What are you guys talking about? See, scrolling through here. General So's Chicken, man, I never thought at the beginning of the season Pitt would win the first round of the NCAA tournament by 17 points. Well, they didn't. They won by 18. 59-41. So, you probably really didn't expect that, right? Glovebox 23, that was fun. Rebounding effort was as good as we've seen from this team. Yeah, I don't think Iowa State was as good of a rebounding team as, say, Mississippi State or Duke or Miami. Those teams were better rebounding teams all season than Iowa State, but Iowa State was still, I think, a plus 5, I want to say, on its rebounding on the season, like versus their opponents. So they were still a decent rebounding team. But Pitt did a great job, and it really was. I went over those stats. It really was a gang rebounding effort. Where you have, like I said, Greg Elliott and Guillermo Diaz-Graham have 8 rebounds each. Nike Sabandi and Jorge Diaz-Graham have 5 rebounds each. How about Jorge with 2 offensive boards of his 5 rebounds? And then Blake Hinson and Jamarius Burton get 4 rebounds each. I mean, you have a real group rebounding effort there to win the rebounding battle by 2. Which doesn't happen very often. I said it in our Panther-Lair.com group text before the game. We were talking about this and that. And I said, look, I don't expect Pitt to out-rebound anybody. What they really need to do is focus on limiting those second chance opportunities. They're going to give up the offensive rebounds. And they did. Iowa State had 16 offensive rebounds, but only 10 second chance points. And that sort of follows the trend from the Mississippi State game, where they gave up a ton of offensive rebounds, but not many second chance points. 10 second chance points on 16 offensive rebounds, I think is pretty good. I think that's a pretty effective performance. At limiting those extended possessions. You're still giving up the extended possessions, but you're not letting them turn those extended possessions into points, which we know has been a problem for Pitt in the past. Like I said, the Miami game in the regular season finale, where they scored 25 second chance points. I mean, you can't let that happen. And they were able to do a good job. So they controlled, they won the rebounding battle, and they limited what Iowa State was able to do with the offensive rebounds that they grabbed. Let's see. Steak on the Grill says, unreal ride. We are all on. It is pretty unreal. I got to say, I mean, it's, not just unexpected compared to preseason expectations, but I mean, So I always say this, right? I always talk about how I don't like when people say, well, if I had told you before the season that this was going to happen, everybody would have signed up for it. I don't like that because things change, right? Expectations change over the course of a season. The context of a season changes. After 34 games, 30 games, 28 games, 20 games, you know who the team is a lot more than you did in November or in October. And so your expectations change. And what you thought they might be capable of in November is not nearly as relevant as what you think they're capable of on February 1st, when you've seen them play 20 games or 25 games. And by the time you get to March 1st, you really know the team, and you should have a concrete idea of what they are. I think going into the ACC tournament, we expected that team to beat Georgia Tech and lose to Duke. I think when we saw the ACC tournament bracket, after watching 31 games or however many they played in the regular season, we knew what to expect. Beating Georgia Tech and losing to Duke. That was what should happen, or what we expected to happen, and it was. Now, coming into the NCAA tournament, I think it was a little bit more dicey. You know less about Mississippi State. You know less about Iowa State. You're not sure what to expect. But I think even if you looked at the expectations as you consider them on February 1st or March 1st, I don't think anyone saw this team winning 2 NCAA tournament games, including one by 18 points. I don't think anyone saw this team recording the biggest seed line upset in school history. So this one I actually will say. If I had told you on February 1st that this team would be playing in the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament with a chance to go to the Sweet 16 after blowing out a 6 seed as an 11 by 18 points, if I had told you that on February 1st, would you sign up for it? I think we can actually say it now. If I had told you on March 1st, if I had told you in the aftermath of the Notre Dame game or the Miami game or the Duke game, if I had told you at any of those points that this was going to happen, first of all, you would have said I was crazy. And second of all, you absolutely would have signed up for it. Everyone would. I definitely think we're past the point of this being gravy. I think we're definitely past the point of this team playing with house money. That's not to say they can't beat Xavier. That's not to say they can't keep winning. They can. They've shown that they can handle a lot of different types of adversity, and they can play in a lot of different types of environments, and they can battle in a lot of different ways. At some point, the luck will run out. I shouldn't say luck. Luck is unfair to the team. Calling it luck is unfair to the team. It discredits what they've accomplished, which they did not accomplish through luck. They accomplished it by being really good at what they set out to do in this particular game. At some point they will run into bad luck. At some point they will run into a bad matchup, and at some point they'll just run into a superior team who they're unable to beat. That point has not come yet. And so we get to watch this team play one more game, at least one more game, on Sunday in Greensboro when they face Xavier. I'm looking forward to it. I think you probably are too. Let's see here. JAMST174. Can we get a Morning Pitt special edition on Sunday? I might have to. I don't know if I might have to. We'll think about it. Dave Yark says, we boxed out today and handled the pressure after they made their run, and the Twins were incredible in all aspects. And if you're not on board with this team going into next year, you're not a Pitt fan. Yeah. I don't know about next year. We'll talk about next year. Joe Baker says, as a Xavier student, happy to give a scouting report on Pitt. Yeah, Joe, we might take you up on that for sure. Reach out to me. Shane G says, Iowa State might be the worst team I ever watched. Look, they're not good offensively. I mean, they're a bad offensive team. They're very good on defense. There's no question about that. But stop me if you've heard this one before. And I think you have, because you probably said it. When you get to the NCAA tournament, it's tough to win with defense. A defense alone. A team like Duke, who can play really good defense, and complement it with really good offense, because they have some guys who can score, some unique skill players, then you can do it. But to be a defense first team, and in some cases defense only, I mean, we've seen that movie before, haven't we? How many times have we seen that movie before? And how many times did we come out of the NCAA tournament saying, you can't just do it with defense alone? And now we've got two very recent examples, as in over the past 4 days, where we saw Pitt face a team that largely tried to do it with defense alone. In the case of Mississippi State, they did it with defense and a scoring big man who does not shoot from outside. And in the case of Iowa State, they did it just with defense. I mean, they didn't really have any good offensive players. They had a couple guys who lead them in scoring, because somebody has to lead them in scoring. But they were one of the lowest scoring teams in the Big 12, which they were able to offset with being the number one defense in the Big 12. But they also were in a real slump coming down the stretch. This team won 19 games this year. And granted, 3 of those wins were against Baylor. But they won 19 games. So they weren't the worst team I've ever seen, but they were a team that tried to get into the tournament and advance in the tournament relying on defense. And it can work. It's just highly unlikely, because at some point you're going to need to score. In this game, Iowa State dragged Pitt down into the muck, and Pitt showed that they could kind of live there, as long as they were playing a team that wasn't going to score a lot. Scroll through here. Steak on the Grill says, I'm so impressed with how resilient this team is. Everybody's stepping up when their number is called. We saw that 20-point lead crumble before our eyes, only for them to gain it back. I wrote about I wrote about this in the 321 column today. I talked about it on the Morning Pit. I talked about it on the post-game show on Tuesday night. I talked about Chris Jans, the Mississippi State coach, who said, and we don't need to spend too much time on this. I mean, you guys remember talking about this. He told John Rothstein, he told his team at halftime, Pitt is going to break. Pitt is going to break. And I said, boy, that's really remarkable, because this team for its flaws, and there are flaws and weaknesses that have cost them games, they haven't really broken like that. Like the way Chris Jans was promising his team they would. They haven't. They've stayed pretty resilient, and stared down adversity. They've had bad matchups, and they've gotten beat in certain ways. They maybe the Clemson game. Maybe they broke in the Clemson game, I guess you could say. But other than that, I mean, the Duke game was just a bad matchup that Duke was able to capitalize on in the second half. The Florida State game, I mean, Pitt just kind of blew that one. The Notre Dame game, it was a bad matchup, and Pitt missed a ton of free throws. And the Miami game, they just gave up all those second chance points. Duke game again, a terrible matchup, but it was never, Chris Jans talking about it, keep chipping away. Pitt is going to break. They haven't really broken in that way. And so in this game where, it was an accomplishment for Iowa State to get the lead down to 7. It was almost a 5-point game, but Jamarius Burton made 2 free throws going into halftime. To get the lead down to 7 was a bit of an accomplishment for Iowa State, a bit of a victory for the Cyclones. But it's sort of, they still needed Pitt to break in the second half. They needed Pitt to fall apart in the second half and wilt. And this team just hasn't wilted. They haven't withered. They haven't waned. They haven't done other things that start with the letter W that mean the same thing. They haven't faded. It just hasn't been in their DNA. And maybe at some point that runs out. Maybe at some point they get tired. Maybe at some point fatigue takes over and they're not able to just keep getting up and battling. But that point hasn't come yet. And it's gotten them 2 wins in the NCAA tournament. Resiliency is a good word for this team. Fighting adversity is a good term for this team. It's what they've been able to do all season long. And it's gotten them to this point where they're now in the round of 32. Winning NCAA tournament games by 18 points. Peninsula P says the Diaz-Graham bros are gaining confidence by the minute. Yeah, they are. I don't think there's any doubt about it. David Allen says, I think playing those top defenses could help the team going forward. Yeah, I think I don't think there's any question about it because they haven't like they've played games like that, but it's been a little while since they've had these kind of games like they've played this week. And we'll just bring up our old friend Ken Pomeroy, who everyone believes in, right? Xavier is number 70 in adjusted defense. Now, you're going to have the contrast here where Xavier is number 9 in adjusted offense, whereas Pitt is, where are they? Number 27. So you have 2 pretty good offenses. And then Xavier with the number 70 defense, Pitt with the number 106 defense. So you're going to have a different kind of game. It's going to be teams that can score. And presumably you'll have a game that'll get out of the 60s. Presumably you'll have a game that'll get into the 70s, and you'll see some points go up in this. But they might almost breathe a sigh of relief that maybe it won't be quite as difficult to get points. Maybe it won't be quite as difficult for Nelly Cummings and Jamarius Burton to do those things they like to do, and Nike Sabandi with driving into the lane and pulling up for jump shots. Maybe it won't be quite as difficult to get those open threes on the outside for Blake Hinson and Greg Elliott. And Nike Sabandi and Nelly Cummings. Now you're gonna have to defend really well, and you're gonna have to rebound really well. And we'll look into Xavier. I'm gonna try to really pronounce their name right this weekend to call it the right name. But we'll look into Xavier a lot over the next 2 days and give as much of a scouting report as we can on Panther-Lair.com. But it should be a different kind of game. Just from that quick glance that we just took at some of the stats, it should be a different kind of game on Sunday. All right. Let's keep going here. Excuse me. Paul Moore says Pitt shooting. I'm going to just go through a bunch of the comments and questions here since we're coming up on the hour, which we like to, that's usually our typical time. Paul Moore says Pitt shooting 25 of 29 is an important stat line that shouldn't go unnoticed. Absolutely, Paul. And they were 10 of 10 in the second half. So they were able to keep making shots from the line. I think that's a huge stat. Brad Condon says, is Pitt cold from 3 or are the last few opponents just that good on defense? What's the target score to beat Xavier? I think 75. Yeah. I don't know if they're cold from 3. I think they just played 2 really good defensive teams. Iowa State not as good at defending the three this season as maybe Mississippi State was, but I mean, they're teams that defended really hard. And I think they made it tough for Pitt to get the looks that they wanted from outside. So I would say that. And then what was the second part? Oh, the target score to beat Xavier? I mean, yeah, 75 seems like a good number to start with. I don't know if, you certainly don't want to put a limit on it. But I think probably 75, you should at least try to get there. Let's see here. Michael Metro, always enjoy the podcast. Please talk about how awesome Nelly and the twins are. I would kill for your hair, by the way. Oh, I don't know why you're talking about my hair. Like you guys can't see the back, and maybe you can't tell how gray it is either. So I'm gonna start wearing hats on this show. But Nelly and the twins, look, Nelly Cummings did not have a good first half. I mean, he was an issue in the first half, I mean, Guillermo Diaz-Graham was having a bigger positive impact on the team in the first half than Nelly Cummings was, but he stepped up in the second half. He scored 13 points in the second half. He cut down on the turnovers in the second half. He handed out a couple of assists and made some big plays. And the Twins, like I said, I mean, they just keep getting better. Jorge did some nice things. Guillermo was totally adequate in his role today. He still gave up some of the strength, and there were still some plays where, the strength was an issue, but he was completely adequate, which with the guard play this team has, with the perimeter play this team has, they just need a center who's adequate. You don't need an impact game changer at center. You just need someone adequate. And I think he was. Chris is a super chatter, says, Chris, how do you see next year's team shaping up? Do we have incoming transfers or good recruits coming in to make us stronger next year? Chris, are we really talking about next year? Man, we were like an hour removed from Pitt winning an NCAA tournament game by 18, and you're asking me about next year? Yes, they have good recruits coming in. They don't have any transfers lined up yet because typically the teams that are getting transfer commitments right now are the ones who are not playing. Coaches don't tend to host recruiting visits and transfer visits when they're still in the NCAA tournament. They have good recruits coming in. Carlton Carrington and Jalen Lowe and Marcus Barnes, they're really good. Or Marlon Bonners, they're really good. But they don't have, I mean, they'll get some transfers to complement those guys. You'll have to watch and see what happens to Pitt's roster. I'm sure some of the guys who have eligibility remaining will not return. It's just sort of inevitable. It's part of the deal. But what does the roster look like next year? I don't know. You've got the 3 recruits coming in. You've got presumably all 3 of the triplets back, Federico, and the Diaz-Graham twins. And, you should have Blake Hinson back. It seems like he's intent on coming back. So, I mean, it's a pretty good start. You get a transfer guard or 2 to help fill out the roster, fill out the lineup, and you should have a pretty talented roster. But, Chris, my man, I appreciate you being a super chatter. It's hard for me to look ahead. I can't even look past Sunday right now. Sunday is the next. Once they lose and they're out of the NCAA tournament, we'll do a lot of stuff on roster construction. But right now, it's hard to look ahead that far. John Christovich says, I hope Federico starts on Sunday. Really? Because I'll have to look at Xavier's situation at center, but I thought Guillermo Diaz-Graham played great tonight. I thought he had a great game. Really. I mean, and right from the start was playing well with defensive rebounds and a block. He had 3 blocks, 9 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 blocks. No turnovers and a steal. I mean, that's a pretty good game. And I think ideally you'd be able to play Guillermo and Federico a lot. Play them both, not together, but play them a lot and get, 25 minutes for one guy, 15 for the other, that kind of thing, or flat, maybe, get a Barbara Walters out there, go for a straight 20-20. But sorry, that was just a good one. This is what happens when we go past an hour, is we start making really good jokes. Look, if I'm Jeff Capel, I'm comfortable with Guillermo Diaz-Graham playing right now, and not necessarily like ahead of Federico, but I'm in no rush to get Federico back out there. If he's not 100%, if he can only handle 10 minutes, I'm okay with that. I'll get 25 minutes at the 5 out of Guillermo and 5 minutes at the 5 out of Jorge, and I'll live with it, because I think those guys can handle it. And again, we'll look at Xavier's center situation and see what it looks like, but those guys can handle it. They've shown that they can handle it, and they're playing well enough that I think you can trust them out there. All right, let's see here. Okay, Joe Baker says Xavier has a 7-footer who's bulkier than Pitt's bigs, really good post scorer who can shoot from 3. So that's a problem. That's trouble. You can't. We've seen Pitt struggle with those 5s who can shoot 3s, and if that's what Xavier is bringing to the table, it's going to be a real challenge on Sunday. But look, we got a lot of time between now and then to talk about it, so we will definitely do a lot of that. Maybe we will get a special Sunday morning edition of the Morning Pit. We will definitely have a live show after the game on Sunday. Once we find out what time the game is starting, we'll have a tentative start time for the post-game show. But, yeah, for now, Pitt fans, enjoy it. Your team, which was not even projected to win 18 games, has just beat an NCAA tournament opponent by 18 points. An 11 seed, knocking off a 6 seed, advancing to the round of 32, where they'll face Xavier for a chance to go to the Sweet 16. What a season. What a season it's been. Pretty remarkable stuff. All right, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on your notifications there so you can get alerts sent to your phone every time we post a new video at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, or anytime we go live for a post-game show or a live show on Wednesday nights or whenever it is. You don't want to miss it, so make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com for all the coverage from the game. Jim Hammett is in Greensboro. He'll have lots of coverage right there at Panther-Lair.com. And of course, if you want to talk to other Pitt fans about the game, go to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. It's the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning into the live stream tonight. Had a lot of fun doing the post-game show. As always, we appreciate everybody who had the added comments and questions and joined the chat. Everybody was a super chatter. We appreciate it for sure. And yeah, Pitt wins 59-41. They're moving on, and they will play Xavier on Sunday. So we will talk to you probably between now and then, and definitely after that game. But until then, Pitt fans, enjoy Friday night. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you on Sunday.